Dream Team? It's your boy Neal back with another reaction video, guys. Here we are we done with the 90s part 2. I feel like this guy's doing a great analysis of the NBA game and how it's evolved over the years. And I absolutely agree with this video so far. But here we are finna jump into the part 2 of it. Make sure before we start, make sure you subscribe, ring the notification bell, give the video a thumbs up, and let's do it.
4 eras at a time, ignoring entire decades of evolution and saying the game back then was better or even as good as it is today. At a certain point, the knowledge and wisdom that comes from actually witnessing decades of NBA history, like some older fans have, becomes skewed and watered down by nostalgia and a generational bias. Superstars are superstars because their game transcends the era they played in, but they also played in an inferior league. These two ideas are not mutually exclusive, and although generational talents of the past would do just fine today, this same logic does not apply to the vast majority of the league throughout the 80s and 90s.
I don't know if he can say that. They gonna come at him for that. The NBA become not trash. I don't know about that.
So if the 80s were inferior to today's league and the 90s were inferior as well, when did the NBA become not trash? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Ironically, I think there's a pretty clear distinction to the skill set of players before Michael Jordan hit his peak and after. For example, the early 90s and late 90s, although being in the same decade, were massively different in play style and skill set. Think for a second about the fact that Magic Johnson was still in his prime in the early 90s, and Allen Iverson was entering his prime in the late 90s. In less than 10 years, basketball became a massively different game. By the late 90s, the players who grew up watching Jordan fly through the air and slice up defenses were in the league and were reshaping the role that perimeter players played. Guys like Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Stephon Marbury, Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter. All these guys came into the league around the same time and were products of what they saw MJ do throughout his career. Players with a skill set that more closely resembles what we see today than it did to the skill sets of players of the 80s and even early 90s. This is where I think most fans might make the distinction of when the league really took a leap, not in competitiveness, but rather play style. You can go back and watch these guys play, and it's not too different than watching an NBA game today. Or you can point to the shift in play style that happened in the late 2010s, after Steph Curry redefined what makes a great championship caliber player, and the league adjusted to this new three-point heavy perimeter-focused style of basketball. Similar to Jordan, the kids who watched what Steph was doing in the mid-2010s emulated that style of play, tailored their games to it, and are now in the league doing things that only Steph could do a decade ago. So if we're done with the 80s and 90s, where can we look back and no longer apply this era tax on these players? I think most fans would agree that the turn of the century is where the modern era of hyper-skilled players began. You can say objectively that this era was not trash, and most players of this generation would do just fine in today's league. But if that is the case, then modern NBA fans are holding a ticking time bomb, and they might not even know it.
Victor Wembanyama, dude, is a monster. Is a unicorn. Is like nothing the NBA has ever seen, dog. This rookie is putting the world on notice. He allowed nothing. If he around the rim, you're not scoring around the rim most of the time. You feel me? Unless you just out muscling him or whatever. But to be that tall, to have a great outside shot, to have handling abilities, to be able to run the fast break, like for a big man, is insane. That tall.
When we are older and a new generation of NBA fans claim our favorite players, the guys we grew up watching, are not as good as the players of the future, what will you have to say? Right now, there is no one in the world who can shoot like Steph Curry. But inevitably, there will be. And eventually, there will be many players who can shoot like him. His records will fall, his percentages won't look as good through the lens of 2040, and although his legacy will be cemented, his actual game will be put into question. And based on the arguments I'm hearing today on why past players were trash, we will have nothing to say that will change their minds. We know that Curry was the first to do what he's doing. He is a pioneer of the modern NBA. We have context to back up our claims. But if we aren't willing to hear older fans out today, what makes us think younger fans will hear us out in the future?
I think both. Like I said, I think both areas are incredible. It's just a different product. The game changes, the game evolves, the game grows. Yeah, but I think, like he said, the stars, superstars, their game could translate to any era. They figure it out. But it's the rest of the NBA, I feel like in the 90s that would struggle playing in today's game. Like early 90s would struggle playing in today's game. The guys who were maybe just there to defense or just there to foul or whatever, to be able to play now, you have to be able to knock down a shot. You cannot be an offensive liability and be on the court anymore. It doesn't exist anymore, dog. The Tony Allens I grew up watching, the Cephaloshes, that position doesn't exist anymore.
Mark my words. There will be a day when young fans will go back, watch film of LeBron, and say he couldn't compete with players of the future. In fact, it's already happening. Fans saying he has no bag. Younger players putting up bigger numbers than he ever did. Skill sets a bit deeper with games that look more polished. It's all fun and games now to crack jokes about past eras. But our day will come too, and it ain't gonna be pretty. But Giannis could only run and dunk. Your era was trash. Y'all had a dude who couldn't get 2 feet off the ground running the whole league. You can scramble to pull up clips and show.
Nikola Jokic is a monster, dog. But I can see the future saying this stuff because the game's gonna continue to change. It's gonna continue to evolve. Bags are gonna get deeper. Players are gonna continue to get more skilled. So yeah, I can see future eras saying this stuff, dog. And I can see us who grew up in this era arguing to death with them. It happens. That's the Kareem and Wilt and Bill Russell were saying like the eras of the 80s and 90s like aren't as strong as it was back when they played. And of course, as it continues to go, fans of the era they grew up in are going to continue to critique and judge the future era and say the game isn't as good as when they watched it. And then the younger eras are going to say the game is much better now. Y'all, it's going to be an ongoing argument 100%. But it's the fun of sports. Debates, arguments. I don't do that because I ain't got time to debate or argue with anybody. But it's cool the way he's breaking it down. I completely agree with him.
The numbers, but their minds will already be made up. This is why I think it is so important to have genuine, thought-out discourse about the game if you're truly a fan of it. But to all of the older fans out there, you kinda started this whole thing. For years, we heard y'all.
That Jimmy High Roller, bro. Thank you. Let me just thank you a million times. Thank you. Y'all did start it. Y'all started it. And now you mad that the younger generation giving it back to you. They give you a taste of your own medicine, and you don't like that. Say it again, Jimmy.
All of the older fans out there, you kind of started this whole thing. For years, we heard y'all badmouth modern players, saying the league is soft, players today couldn't compete back then. Back in my day, real men played the game. Y'all cannot be mad that some fans are done with the 80s and 90s when y'all never even gave modern basketball a chance. Sure, a lot of fans never took the time to go back and watch the greats of the past.
No, I
but
wouldn't.
Let's be honest for a second. Older fans don't watch games today.
No.
They catch a stray clip on Facebook of LeBron flopping, and like an echo chamber of disgruntled old men, they just start firing away in the comments, agreeing with one another. Y'all asked for this. I've been watching the NBA since the mid-2000s.
Bro, he is so on the money right now. He in the nail right on the head right now, dog.
Kobe, D-Wade, McGrady, Iverson, Shaq.
Oh, my God. That's when I started, 2000s. When D-Wade entered, is when I really just started watching basketball. He's my favorite player of all time, bro. Dwayne, watching him play was magical, dog. It was magical. But yes, y'all started it. He's hitting the nail on the head.
Those were my guys. But I can acknowledge those greats and say they were incredible while also acknowledging that that version of the NBA as a whole was not as refined or as good as it is today. Now, will I be able to make that distinction in 20 years when some snot-nosed brat tells me my glorious king was trash? I'm not so sure.
He had a left. Mike had a left.
Now, it's time to once and for all take a real close look at this accusation that Michael Jordan did not have a left hand. I felt like I was having a bad dream when I first saw this claim. But unfortunately, I was not. I feel like no one actually believes this. This is just some high-level trolling. But in an effort to stop this nonsense from spreading any further, I have no choice but to take these accusations seriously. So I selected 8 random games ranging from Michael Jordan's rookie season all the way up to the mid-90s, and play by play gathered all of his possessions throughout these games, charted when he went to his right, when he went to his left, and what those possessions resulted in. And here is what I found. Jordan made a move with his left hand or his right hand 227 times. Of those 227 moves, 121 of them were with his right hand and 106 of them were with his left hand. Of the 121 right-handed moves, he passed up or got fouled on 54 of them, so I didn't bother charting those. 65 of these moves resulted in a shot, in which he made 63% of them and only turned the ball over 2 times. Now, moves that he made with his left hand resulted in a pass or him getting fouled 45 times, while 55 of these left-handed moves ended up in a shot, in which he made 51%, and 6 moves resulted in a turnover. So based on this data, Jordan was definitely more comfortable going right, especially near the rim and even on mid-range jumpers. He struggled a bit in comparison to his right whenever he pulled up off of a left-handed dribble. But overall, Jordan went to his left 47% of the time, and although it was his weaker hand, he was still above league average even while going to his left. But 8 games and 350 minutes of basketball is a relatively small sample size. So I looked into it further and found this. A detailed breakdown of Michael Jordan's shot chart and shot tendencies in 3 seasons from 1990 to 1992. 126 games and over 4,800 minutes in total, tracking exactly what Michael did on the court for 3 seasons. And here's what the data shows. In total, Michael made 1,074 moves in isolation, going either to his right or to his left hand. 48% of those moves were with his right hand, and 52% of those moves were with his left hand. When going to the right, Michael shot 61.7% on 410 shots with 15 turnovers, resulting in 1.38 points per possession. When going to his left, Michael shot 61.3% on 421 shots with 36 turnovers, resulting in 1.31 points per possession. So even with a much larger sample size, Michael not only had a left hand, he went to it just as often as he went to his right and was nearly as
you don't become one of the greatest of all time with no left hand. Like, it just doesn't have, you got to have use of both hands.
Efficient with his left as he was with his right. Now, for some context, throughout this 3-year span, Michael made on average 4.4 left-handed isolation moves, or in this case, isolation possessions, that resulted in 1.31 points per possession. Now, here are some prolific scores from this season and their overall tendencies and efficiency in isolation. Keep in mind, this data includes both right-handed and left-handed moves from these players. And now here is Michael Jordan with just his left hand.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'd say contrary to what has now become popular belief, Michael Jordan had a left hand. And I cannot believe we had to dig into the data to come to this conclusion.
I feel you, big dog. We not, though.
I think the overall idea that the 80s and 90s were a far less skilled time in the NBA compared to today is probably fair. I mean, you'd be crazy to think the game hasn't evolved in 4 decades. But to say the league was trash back then is just wrong. I think more than
Agreed.
anything, it's the
Agreed.
style of play and the way basketball games would unfold back then that really throws some fans off when they go to watch film of these old games.
Also, it's just a different product. Today's game is a different product of what they watched in the 90s, and that game is a different product. Yeah, like when we go, anybody now who goes to watch it, it's just a different product you're watching.
It's like looking at a box score from the mid-2000s and thinking everyone sucked because the games finished with final scores in the 80s. But the players weren't bad, it was just a different game back then. It was slower, more methodical, more team and scheme-based than it is today. And similarly, I think you could say the 80s and 90s had its fair share of bad basketball. But that doesn't mean all the players were bad, especially the superstars of those eras. That was just the state of the game they were playing in. I think some older fans have a skewed perception of how good the game was back then, but I also think they just genuinely liked that style of ball regardless of the evolution of the league. In 20 years, there could be a dozen players around the league that shoot like Steph Curry, but I doubt we will hold the same appreciation and affinity for those players as we did to the guy who pioneered this style of play and did it during the good old days. In the 90s, no one looked back at how the league was in the 60s claiming it was better. And so realistically, we shouldn't be looking back at the 80s and 90s claiming the league was superior than it is today, or even just as good for that matter. A lot of these ideas that favor modern basketball are becoming more mainstream as fans dive deeper into these topics and add context to narratives that have been floating around for decades. But I think this push to be done with the 80s and 90s is a bit overkill. We want to add context and nuance and knowledge to these discussions, not remove entire decades from it altogether. Sadly, I don't think any of this has or will change anyone's mind. This revolt against old school ball was either confirmation of what you already thought, or this entire discussion is just blasphemy to you. Are we done with the 80s and 90s? Maybe, but for the sake of the game and the greats that paved the way, I sure hope not.
Yeah, I don't think we're done. Like you said, I think they helped pave the way for what we have today, but you just have to realize that the game has evolved today and players are more skilled. And it is a completely different game that they're playing than they played in the 90s. It's a different product. But, yeah. Whether you want to watch the 90s, whether you want to watch today, watch what you want. Do what makes you happy. I couldn't care less. Make sure y'all subscribe, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. It's your boy Neal. Out.